How much horsepower is too much horsepower? Or is that impossible? According to Shelby, it is. According to Shelby, there's no such thing as too much horsepower, only not enough grip. But on a motorbike, is it possible to have too much horsepower? Welcome to Rider Ramblings, and today we're going to discuss horsepower and some of my bikes and the horsepower that they had, and whether or not you think the bikes today, or some of the bikes today, are too powerful. They have too much horsepower. So, do you think we should limit the horsepower? Do you think we should not limit the horsepower? What are your thoughts? Please let me know in the comments below. So, today you can buy a motorcycle that has, according to the information I've seen, 329, that's right, horsepower. 329 horsepower. So, that's rather a lot. I believe it's the Kawasaki H2R, if I remember rightly, that has such an amount of horsepower. The ordinary H2 is somewhere around about the 200 horsepower mark. I can't remember exactly. Is that too much? I was talking about electronic aids in one of my ramblings. I'll put a link at the end to the video. But should we have motorcycles with so much horsepower that we have to have electronic aids? Is that a sensible thing? Could you control a motorcycle that has, say, more than 100 horsepower without electronic aids? Would you be able to do it? This is something we need to think about. And we seem to have this big rush for horsepower, just like we had the rush for top speed or whatever in the early 2000s, there or thereabouts, when the 𝗕𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗀 came out, as that was Suzuki's offering to be the fastest road bike of the time, or the most powerful road bike of the time. As going around corners was, I'm told, a little bit interesting in some of the early 𝗕𝗵𝗶𝗀s. But what do you think is too much horsepower? I mean, this bike here has 149, I believe it is, 149 horsepower. And if you saw my last video, Riding in the Rain, you'll have seen me riding in torrential rain and accelerating out roundabouts and round corners and things like that. And although I was not using any of the real power of this bike, I wasn't not using the power to a certain extent. I was actually, I was riding it how I would normally ride it in the rain, with speeds up to about 55, 60 miles an hour, somewhere around about there. And at no point did the traction control light come on. At no point did I use the ABS. At no point did I need any of the electronic aids to tame the horsepower on this bike. So, what would be the limit? So, I've just decided that 149 horsepower is suitable for me. I don't have a problem with it, even in horrendous weather. It's not a problem. But if you see today, I mean, a lot of the bikes that we see on the market today, 650s, 500s, 350s, that type of thing, Himalayans and Triumph 400s and so on, their horsepower ratings are sort of between about 40 and 50-ish horsepower. And that seems to be sort of the limit, and a lot of people are saying you don't need any more, you don't need more than 40 horsepower or whatever. Now, the Deauville, the NT700VA that I had, was, I think, 47 horsepower, it might have been 49, I can't actually remember. It was either 47 or 49, something around about that level. It was perfectly fine. It was okay. It wasn't, you know, blindingly quick because it had 265 kilos before I got on it and before I filled up the luggage. So it was quite a heavy bike. I mean, this one's with the luggage on, but without me is probably 300 kilos. So another 35, 40 kilos heavier. But the Deauville was fine. I mean, you know, I did take it on motorways and it would sit quite happily at 70 miles an hour, which is the legal limit in the UK, and it had a lot more to spare. I mean, in France we can take it up to 130 kilometers an hour, which is 80 miles an hour, and it certainly did that no problem on my trip back from Brittany and from Normandy as well, which are the two long trips that I took it on. So on occasion I did take it down the A13 where the speed limit is 130 kilometers an hour when I was commuting. So that's fine, 48, yes, no problem whatsoever. But this is 100 horsepower more. Do we need it? As I say, if we go back to some of my bikes, I had a CX500. That's 47 horsepower. So about the same as the Deauville. The Deauville was 680 cc's and the CX500 was 490 something, if I remember rightly, and only about 2 or 3 horsepower difference. I had a 𝗪𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃, the original 𝗪𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃, the one that replaced the VF500F, and I also had a VF500F. Now the VF500F had 63 horsepower, and I seem to remember that my CBR had 66 or 67. So again, 180 horsepower, sorry, 180 cc's more, but only about 4 horsepower available. Having said that, the 𝗪𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 was very light indeed. It was, I had the impression, though I can't prove it, that it was lighter than the VF500F. And I honestly think, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, I've had bikes which have had less horsepower. I've had a Super Dream, a 250N, the CB250N. This is a very long time ago, and I believe that's got 27 horsepower, I think, if I remember rightly. I also had a CB125, which I think had about 12 horsepower or something like that. It was definitely not quick. And they were not good. I'm going to say now that I think that was too little. The 40 horsepower mark, if you're riding in town and you're commuting most of the time, I would say that's fine. 40 to 50 horsepower. That's absolutely fine. That's sufficient. You can nip past things, you can get going, no problem whatsoever. But once you start touring, I found that this bike here was better. It's much more relaxed. It's much easier to ride. You're not having to change the gears, although you're probably seeing me change the gears a lot at the moment. We have a deviation. See that when I was coming through. Why have we got a deviation? I think I know what it is. It's doing some work at the level crossing. On that. So what do you think is the sweet spot for horsepower? I would honestly buy a bike with more than 150 horsepower, even without electronic aids, because I mean, I don't think I've activated the ABS on this bike ever. I don't think I have. And the traction control only came on because I was on manky bridgestones, which were absolutely terrible in the wet. I wasn't even, accelerating hard. I was accelerating like I did on the Deauville. I mean, it was not even quick. And that came on once. The level crossing up here, when I went across it last week in the pouring rain, I actually felt the back step out on this bike, but the TCS light did not flash. I kept checking on the video, and at no point did the TCS light come on, even though I felt the rear of the bike step out. So possibly it was because it went sideways instead of it stepped out sideways, but let's have a look. 𝗪𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗍 wasn't barred when I came down the other way. Never mind. Let's have a look. This looks interesting. School coming out time, so God knows what's going on here. I have no idea where I'm supposed to go, but I imagine it's somewhere down near the station. So I'll be confused. So, talking about horsepower again. Is this say vehicles coming? Better be careful. I don't know this road. It looks like we're at a school, so there are people running across the road, so I better be a bit careful. Right. So, do you think Shelby was right? You can never have too much horsepower. Only insufficient grip. What do you think? Please let me know. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. I've no idea where I am, by the way. Not whatsoever.